So I see the PsiGames being the psychic Olympics for the world, where we have people from all over the world get together and benchmark where we are in these different psi abilities. And of all places, I ended up in India in the Himalaya mountains. And you know, you're naked, you have no clothes, you start to go through a process of rediscovery of your deeper self. One of the things that one of our lineage teachers would always say, the people who know are always the easiest to fool. I like to think of it as like Star Wars with the Sith and the Jedi. Like, yeah, of course there are people who can be broken and have issues and challenges and still be able to do these things. A matter of fact, many people who have really strong psychic abilities have had trauma in their life.
And we're live. Yeah. Hi, guys. Thanks so much. My name is JT Erickson. I'm your host for No More Strangers. Today I'm in Fayetteville, North Carolina, joined by Hakim Isler.
Yep. Yeah.
Hakim is kind of a lot of things. He served in the U.S. Army Special Operations Group as a member of the PSYOPs group. He is probably notable to a lot of people for his time on Naked and Afraid, which I got questions.
Okay.
And the real reason that I thought we were sitting down, and I think we're going to go into a little more on this, is he's also the creator of the PsiGames. Not to be confused with PSYOPs, and we might make that distinction. But essentially, if you're unaware, the PsiGames is sort of like the Olympics for psionic or psi abilities, for lack of a better word. And just for example, some of these disciplines that we talk about are telekinesis, remote viewing, and blind sight. Lots of others. I don't know the names for some of them. But this stuff is really cool. So if for whatever reason you are unfamiliar with the PsiGames, please check it out and we'll talk about that more. But Hakim, seriously, Naked and Afraid?
Yeah.
The heck were you thinking? How was that? That sounds amazing.
Actually, it turned out to be one of the most enlightening experiences in my life. I didn't go in knowing that that was going to be the case. It was a dare between a friend and myself that, you know, I wouldn't be able to do this thing. And I just put in the application just to kind of see, like, just to be able to tell him I did it and it didn't work. And, you know, unbeknownst to me, these guys got my application, loved me, and was like, we're going to offer him a spot. And so they called me and was like, hey, we want you on the show. Then I had to do it, you know?
Yeah.
And of all places, I ended up in India in the Himalaya mountains. And, you know, you're naked, you have no clothes. It was 32 degrees at night. It's 60 degrees during the day, you know, and you have to figure it all out. You have to figure out water, you have to figure out food and shelter. There's none of that stuff provided for you. And you get one tool, and I designed like the special axe that I brought with me. And you get one partner. And the story is like the concept of Adam and Eve, one man, one woman. How did they survive in the wild? And so it was really, really powerful, because when you're in a situation where you are away from everything, and away from everyone pretty much that you know and love, and you're up in this mountain and you're just surrounded by the natural elements, you start to go through a process. You start to go through a process of rediscovery of your deeper self, and how you relate to the actual natural world. And that was very impactful for me. And it set me off on a journey of later buying my own land and starting a nonprofit and getting immersed in the wilderness and creating situations for people to go out and experience the same.
Yeah, something along those lines. I was listening to your interview on Open Minds. Regina did a great job. You should check it out. And elements of it reminded me of something like a vision quest from some of the indigenous experiences that they put their young men through. You had mentioned that you had some, I guess, visionary experiences as a part of this. Do you mind talking a little bit about that? Because I can see sort of a through line of how this applies to the rest of it, and almost a Joseph Campbell-esque hero's journey.
Yeah, it definitely was. So I had some challenges with PTSD that I didn't realize. Special operators are really good at being able to compartmentalize.
Yep.
Especially in PSYOP. PSYOP is like, we understand the mind, we understand how the mind works, we understand all those things. So of course we can't have any problems.
You create a separation inside of that compartmentalization,
exactly,
saying, "Oh no, I see this in other people.
Yep.
I know what this is, so it's not going to affect me."
Yeah, exactly. And in that way, you kind of hide from yourself. I'm a yogi now. I practice yoga, and one of the things that one of our lineage teachers, Krishnamacharya, said, or Desikachar, actually, his son, in one of his books, is that his father, Krishnamacharya, would always say, like, the people who know are always the easiest to fool, So the people who are like, I absolutely 100% know this about myself or know this about whatever, are easier to get fooled by unsuspecting things because they're not looking for them. They're not really paying attention. They're just like, oh, I already got that. And that can sometimes put you in this false sense of security.
Yeah.
And so for me, as a PSYOP guy, I knew that I can have those problems. And when I was up there on the mountain with nothing to hide, no missions to hide behind and keep me occupied, it really came out that, no, I'm just a human being, and there's a fragility to that, and there's a fragility to the mind, especially what we perceive as our true selves, when in reality we don't know our true selves, because we start to place who we are and our purpose we center it around these ideas that our society holds. Oh, part of who you are is you have to be financially savvy, and you have to have this type of job, and you have to have these type of friends that you like, and part of who I am is the coffee I drink every day. And, and all that stuff starts to build up as like this collective of who you are, but really that's not who you are. What we are is the true source of nature, the true source of unchanging energy that's out there. Sometimes the yogis might call it Atman, and so, yeah, that's it. And once you strip all that away and you're faced with this kind of truth of this collective energy that you're a part of, it really can shake you up. Like, whoa, all that stuff I thought I was is not who I am, and I'm something else. And this something else doesn't look like anything I thought I looked like. And that can be really shocking. And so I had that experience out there.
So many directions I want to go on that, because that's fascinating. And you're changing, unfortunately or fortunately, the way I look at reality television. And maybe it's just the subset of survival reality that you found yourself in.
Yeah.
And I'll start with the more material aspects. When you first went onto the show, did you have survival experience? I know you were in PSYOPs, but okay.
Yeah. So I started in my ninja martial arts when I left New Jersey and moved to Ohio in '99 to train in this ninja martial art. And the ninja were very much wilderness people, survival people. So my teachers started doing stuff with us outdoors. And then I joined the Army. Then the Army gave me survival training in the wild, in case I was in a position as a operator where I had to escape some captivity or something, and I was out in the wilderness. So we did this thing called SEER training.
Yeah.
And so did that, and then got out. Friends of mine had some survival schools, and so I helped them with those schools. And then, of course, when Naked and Afraid came up that I was going to do it, then I dove really deep into survival, and then I had my experience. And then after that, I continued with the survival, wrote a book on survival and all this other stuff. So,
yeah. And wow. Sorry, bear with me. That's awesome. And you described two separate things in there. And I think the first one I'd like to touch on is that recognition of yourself beyond the construct that we build around the identity that we forge through our experience in society. And you sort of stripped away all of those layers is one way of framing what you described. What did you find at the core? I mean, you had referenced Atma. How did that feel to you once it was all stripped away?
Well, this was 14 years ago, so I'll try to go back, or 13 years ago, I'll try to go back and.
That's fair.
What did it feel like? I don't know I can't it was a lot of stuff. And I don't even know if feeling was a thing. I think it's whatever feelings are and whatever thoughts are, it's something outside of that.
Sort of beyond it.
Beyond it. Yeah. And I think that's where it becomes interesting and difficult for people to find words.
Right.
Because words don't exist wherever this thing is.
Oh, I'm feeling attacked here.
So
I'm always trying to reframe the experience into words to help communicate it.
Yeah.
But it being beyond language or beyond our capacity to translate.
Yeah.
I can see why that's difficult for people.
Yeah. And we've struggled with that on a myriad of different things. And, and when times we've lacked words for something, we found things that we've attached to that that don't always actually connect, but it's all we have.
Right.
And so then as we get deeper, like even in psychology, as we get deeper in the understanding of psychology, new words were formed to kind of help us reframe things that people used to say all the time, And so in the past that we realized weren't the best way to say that or weren't really exactly true, but that's all they had back then. And they had no frame of reference or understanding of what that would be like if they had, a different type of word that meant something. And so things get created all the time. And so I think, when it comes down to this, they're hot topics. People like to say, quantum pops up in everything.
We were talking about this yesterday.
The quantum, the quantum energy of Atman, it's like, come on, do we really know what that means? When we're still discovering what quantum is, like
even like 50, 80, 100 years after it was first proposed.
Yeah. And I mean, we're still trying to figure out completely string theory. And now there's ideas that maybe string theory is not the actual theory. And
maybe that's a gating and there's something on the side that we're working through.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, this stuff goes really deep. People will do their best. And so you can't knock people when they do their best. No. But again, the challenge is to try to say or speak anything with levels of certainty when you don't really know. And that's the challenge. That's the challenge. There's a way that we can all as a society agree on something that sounds right.
Right.
But even then, it sounds right in that time. And science is good for that, and scientists will say, oh, this isn't possible or that's not possible. And it's like, well, it's not possible yet.
Yeah.
And then, based on it, I had a perfect example of this, which is really funny. I know I'm going slightly off.
No, I love this. So I want to go here.
But the billionaire tech guy who, Androl, I think it is. He's he has this company. He makes all these drones and stuff, and he's a super cool dude. I love watching him and how his brain works and stuff like that. But he got asked in an interview about if UAPs exist, and he was just like, well, I think they could, but he was like, I feel like they're from the past. He was like, because what we know about, and then he crosses and he says, so what we know about physics, it would be too hard to come from the future, but it would be a lot easier for people to come from the past, right? And so
got it.
It was really kind of weird because I'm just like, you're willing to say that we don't really understand how they do what they do.
Right.
And then you rely on the things that we know, which is this physics. But the reality is that our physics may not even apply to what these guys are doing because we don't really we don't know what level that they're on,
right.
So like it would be like a monkey in the forest and a person pops up and they're just like, oh, he had wings and he flew here because that's what we know. The only things we know have wings are birds and they fly in the sky and they come here. Not knowing that we had a helicopter and we have a whole terminology for that and a science for that. They don't even understand that science. They can't understand that science as it pertains to them right this moment unless they advance a little bit more. And so we are talking about things that we don't really have a real terminology or framework for.
Right.
We try to fit it into the framework we already have.
Exactly.
And that could be a disservice to us as a species. And so even that guy at that level is willing to accept that there might be a way for beings from the past to travel forward in time, but then he's going to cut it off at beings from the future traveling backwards. And then he says, well, it's because of physics. And then it's like, we may not even know what type of physics these guys are dealing with.
And that's a really cool thing, because part of the way you described his comment was the physics that we know, as though securing it and cementing it and saying this is an absolute truth, instead of recognizing that we've described versions of the phenomena over the last couple thousand years using an approach that advances along with our understanding of science. And every moment we think we are at the pinnacle. Like, what we know right now is the absolute truth, and nothing can ever surpass it.
Yeah.
And as we advance our understanding, our language, to the point you were making, around phenomena begins to advance to meet our current understanding. And so when, to your point, when people are saying it's all about the quantum entanglement, and that's how we're having these telepathic experiences, or we're able to have conversations with potential non-human entities, that's because of a quantum entanglement. But again, 100 years ago, nobody would have said that. They would have said spooky magic.
Yeah.
And we talked about the language of magic last night, and I have some folks who are going to hate me or love me for this part. Because of that continuing progression of our scientific understanding, to me, that keeps moving the idea of magic further and further and further. And we keep finding that it isn't magic, it's something understandable. And I believe from our chat last night at dinner that you still believe that there is some intangible, we have to call it magic. And I struggle with that framework.
I just think it's a word. So I think we get wrapped up in these words again, going back to how we were just talking about it.
Guilty.
And so these things get us all wrapped up like we understand, and we really have, we have frameworks that people said, well, if I'm able to do this thing, I'm able to move this thing without touching it, we call that magic.
Right.
But somebody else might have called it PK. Somebody else might have called it mind-matter interaction. We have different words. With us being able to see without our sight, the most scientific term right now is extraocular vision. But some people call it blind sight.
Technically correct.
And some people call it, and some people call it mind sight.
Right.
Some people might even stray to call it remote viewing or intuitive sight.
Yeah.
So
I've even heard dermal vision, which is
I've not heard that one yet.
It's a wild one. Yeah.
But, people have these ways of trying to explain this stuff, and then these terms get loaded, and then people want to debate about them, about which one is which, when we really don't even understand the thing. Excuse me. So I think that, that all of the possibilities are possible. It's good to have a good understanding of how we can talk about these things and communicate, so that we have some sort of taxonomy, so that we know we're starting at the same point. So we're talking about mind sight. Well, what is mind sight? How is it different from extraocular vision, or is it the same? And so once we can identify that we're talking about seeing without your eyes, then we can start to, as a team or a group, to progress using that as the foundational language of what allows us to move forward. But if I'm talking about mind sight, which is you seeing something real time in this room without your eyes,
right,
and you're talking about remote viewing, which, based on the definition of remote viewing, is you being able to access something in a different time and place through some sort of mechanism in your mind in which you're able to bring in this information, then we're not even starting the conversation in the same place. So then as we start to try to figure this out and develop it and move forward, I'm thinking one thing and you're thinking the other thing, but we are calling it the same thing. So I think that's where it's important. So if we're going to talk about magic, how do we define magic?
Right.
And find that common ground, and then we move forward. So if you're saying there's a mechanism in your brain that allows you to influence something or do something, and that would be, you would rather call that, mind-matter interaction, but that's your definition. And then I'm calling it magic, but also I say it's mind matter interaction. Then the underlying thing that we're really communicating about is mind matter interaction.
Yeah.
And now that we have that, then we can really do the work. But the semantics of it, at some point, we got to get over so that we can actually do the real work.
Because it gets in the way of that collaborative understanding.
Yeah.
And I love that we have people from all the different disciplines starting to come together. And we saw that at the PsiGames.
Yeah.
Where now people who have just been focused on TK or PK are having conversations with remote viewers, and they have in the past. Like, there's a lot of sort of cross-pollination anyway.
Yeah.
But getting them all into the same space and having them sitting down with scientists, having them sit down with mediums, and seeing that there are some similar aspects to what they're doing.
Yeah.
Or having, Dr. Tarrant measure brain waves of people across different aspects of this phenomenon.
Yeah.
And seeing pretty similar things.
Yeah.
Across the board.
Yeah.
You keep using the word in your brain when you're referring to these interactions. There's a suggestion with a lot of this that this is sort of outside of the brain, and it's the consciousness, which there are whole discussions here. Do you see it as part of the physiological experience, manipulating matter, so to speak? Or do you think that this is something out beyond our being in the conscious realm, dictating, constructing, manipulating reality?
Oh, okay. So I don't know if I used the term in your brain, but if I did, then
I might be misquoting.
Okay. Yeah.
Correct the record, man.
Yeah. So I don't think I used that particular phrase, but there is a discussion about when you so there's this kind of general idea, and Dean Radin talks about this a lot in Real Magic and Science of Magic and stuff like that, that there are three aspects to the psi phenomenon that tend to pop up, or three categories. And there's like ESP, which is this idea of extrasensory perception. So something outside of my normal senses, or maybe a greater aspect of senses that I haven't recognized, or we haven't recognized, or we're starting to learn about.
Right.
But I'm gaining information from out there, right? So that would be like remote viewing. That would be like clairvoyance. Like, I'm able to tap into something and pull in information and receive information from somewhere else. Then there's like interaction.
Right.
I'm interacting with my environment. Now, the terms that have been used in the past are mind matter interaction, meaning some level of mind, whether that's mind as in my brain, which may be where you got that from.
Yep.
Or it's mind as in this greater expansive consciousness mind.
Right.
That I'm able to tap into. At some level, me and this thing are interacting, and I'm able to influence it. And then there's theurgy, and there's this idea that I can connect with something through ritual or practice, or I'm able to, link up with non-human intelligences, angels, and things of that nature, and get certain information. And so those three categories tend to be the categories that show up the most. And then there are like all these subcategories that people have encounters, and they call it different things. They call it magic, or they call it sorcery, or they call it this, or they call it that, or whatever the case may be. But those categories tend to be the thing. And so therefore, I say all of that to say, like, well, is this an idea of, based on your question, of am I receiving information? Am I influencing information and things? Am I working in conjunction with something to learn, gather, pull information, or influence those things?
Did you just yin yang me?
No.
Okay, because
I
that would
don't
work.
think so.
No. Like, no, I'm thinking about it in some of the chi schools where they're talking about receiving being yin or influencing being yang, and then the balance being. Yeah.
Well, I guess, that framework still works in that perspective. And so, so this is where I come from in my understanding. Again, I don't land hard on any of these things, because my ultimate goal, especially with the PsiGames, is to bring together all the perspectives so that we can have a deep conversation. The challenge of that is that people from these different perspectives come in and they're so dead set on their perspectives.
The curse of mastery.
Yeah. And so it's like, okay, well, it's good for you to say that this is how it works. But the reality is that this Chinese master over here is doing this and he calls it something different. And this Hindu master is over here doing this and they call it something different. But then when we go down to asking them how to explain it, then all of a sudden we start seeing similarities of like how they explain what they're doing. So the goal is that we get these people together to have these conversations so that we can start finding out what the underlying currents are, and then give people who are interested in this a place where they can find those who they connect with, right? So I may not connect with this yogi, but I connect very well with this Chinese mystic, or this Jewish mystic, or whatever the case may be. And so now, but they're all saying the same thing, but they go about it in very different ways. But I just really connect with this way. So now we've created a place for people to find those, to hear all the discussions, and then to find the people where they're able to actually connect with those people and then start to learn from those people. And I think that's the real value in something like the PsiGames. And that's where I'm coming from a certain perspective, is that there is for me, just to be honest, and this could be incorrect, right? But this is just my human perspective, not my global, consciousness, Atman perspective, is that there could be a way that you could probably go a little bit too far in this and just, again, imagination and make things up and not really have any true grounding. And I've had some conversations with people where I'll start to question and ask questions about some of the stuff that they're saying. And then, they will kind of say, well, this is what I feel.
Yeah.
And that could be right and that could be wrong. But they're not willing to say that it's wrong. They're just like, this is it. I'm right. And that's where I think some of the challenge comes, is that, you could feel a certain way, but it doesn't mean that that way is 100% right. And again, if you're a true seeker of truth and knowledge, you're always open to, maybe I might be when I take all this information in from wherever it's coming and I filter it down into my tiny brain, that the portion that I'm filtering may not always be correct.
Right.
And there might be other stuff in that was coming in that I just missed because I filtered it down into this small straw. And so, it's like having pulp in a liquid. Yeah. You have all these little pieces of pulp, and let's say they all carry information, but when I suck in the straw, I'm only getting certain pieces of pulp. So I'm only getting certain information. There's still all this pulpy information out here that I haven't sucked in the straw yet.
Yeah.
And if I just took that one sip, then there's a huge cup of information with pulp in it.
Yeah.
And I only have this little tiny straw worth of that information that actually got into me. And so there's a lot that could still be missing. And so I think when we have multiple minds all sucking in the straw, and then we have a whole room, we all sucked out of the same cup, eventually we've absorbed everything that was in that cup. So now when we start to communicate, we're all communicating about the information we got when we took our sip.
Yep.
And that gives us the greater opportunity for us to actually come up with the deeper essence of what was truly the information that was enclosed in that cup.
I kind of love that metaphor. And part of what it seems like you're describing is sort of increasing the size of that straw through sharing our information. Because if I'm the only one with a tiny little straw, I'm not just going to miss a lot of the pulp. I'm going to miss the big stuff that doesn't fit in the straw, and it's going to block me, and I'll feel done.
Indeed.
Like I'll think I'm done drinking because it's blocking that straw.
Yeah.
Weird way for me to forward the metaphor. But I think that's right. And part of what you are also describing in comparing, contrasting ancient Chinese, Jewish, Hindu structures for this are the cultural overlays that we drop on top of our understanding. And I think it's important to recognize where those are, and having, again, to use the frame, this cross-pollination of ideas allows us to find the core similarities. And I don't think it means that we reject the other aspects which led to that development, but it's understanding how they influenced the approach taken and seeing that, I think, to part of the point that's being made, there isn't necessarily one way to do something like PK, psychokinesis. There isn't just one way to do mind sight, blind sight. There are different ways that are going to work for different people. presumably based on their beliefs.
Yeah.
From what everybody tells me,
Yeah.
the biggest thing stopping us from doing these things in our daily life is our belief that we can't.
Yes. Yeah.
And given a different cultural background, we might have more flexibility
Yeah.
in what we believe we can do.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very true. It's very true. And, you know, in the sense that I've seen that play out, you know, and I've seen people have these, and there's experiments that have been run where you have the experimenter effect, where, you know, you have somebody who believes they can do something. They're doing it around outside of the, you know, research lab. They get into the research lab, and now they have all these skeptics looking at them like saying, oh, just prove this to me, you know. Yeah. Yeah. And then sometimes those things don't work, right? And then they say, oh, see, I told you. And I often say that it could be that person's own psychic ability blocking your psychic ability, because they don't believe so strongly that that's putting some sort of energy into the air that's disrupting, you know, your signal and your ability to do whatever. Now, some people may say, well, that's a cop-out. Well, again, we don't know.
We don't know.
You know, we're coming up with our best theories based off of who we are as these human meat suits with this greater information, this greater access to spirit and information that is being filtered down to a certain level. And we have these multi-dimensions to us, and some people are just heavily invested in that intellectual dimension, which kind of submits the spiritual dimension, you know, or the divine or the esoteric, you know. And so therefore they're looking from a very particular, very skewed or very different lens, and it's making it hard for them to see the greater aspect. I always use Elon Musk's example. I listened to this podcast called Business Wars, and it was a whole series they did on like Tesla and Elon Musk. And one of the things I thought that was really impactful about his story, but this same concept has happened multiple times throughout years and generations, which is Elon sells PayPal. He makes all this money. Then he gets this crazy harebrained idea that he wants to make us a multi-planet species.
Right.
And he says that if this is our only place that we can be, we're at risk of like a meteor hitting
literally
us and wiping
anything.
us out. Yeah.
You're right.
And so and that's good survival strategy. Let's get multiple places that we can inhabit, and those places be off planet. Well, he's the only one really thinking about this in a way that I'm going to come up with a way to do it.
Right.
So he says, well, how do I build my own rocket? So he approached NASA, and NASA's like, nah, bro, we're not doing any of that craziness. You know, that's too much for us.
It's not our mandate.
It's not our mandate, right? So he's like, and then who are you? You know, you're just like you don't have any, you know, space rocket engineer degrees or any of this stuff that we would, you know, that we would value this conversation coming from somebody who doesn't even know the space.
You're a tech bro.
You know, you're a tech bro. Doesn't even know this space, right?
Challenge accepted, by the way.
Yes, challenge accepted. So then he says, okay, I'm going to do it anyway. He finds out that we still buy our rockets from Russia. He approaches, he links up with this guy who had some connections to Russia and buying these rockets. They set up a meeting. Those Russians guys say they're going to sell him, you know, some rockets for, I think it was like 8 million or something like that. He get ready to sign the contract. The guy says, oh, we raised the price to like 13 million or whatever the number was. And so Elon was like, no, you told me it was going to be this much. Now you're changing it. I don't want to do business like that. He says, I'm not doing this. He gets on the plane. So most people would say, okay, tried, didn't work. Not this guy. I
didn't know this story, by the way. This is amazing.
While he's on the plane, he starts looking up line by line what it takes to build an actual rocket. Then he creates a spreadsheet. It needs this, it needs that, it needs this. Then he starts looking for pricing for those different items, comes up with this idea as he's looking at this thing, was like, well, the body of a rocket looks a lot like a grain silo.
Right.
Right? Maybe I can get a grain silo company to make the body of these rockets. instead of like creating some factory that only makes rocket parts, we go to a place that's already making these. And so he partners with these guys. That saves him loads of money. He continues down this path, finds the high-level space engineers and, you know, rocket scientists that are coming out of MIT and all these other places, hires these guys, gives them a good salary, and he starts building SpaceX. And again, people were still laughing at him. Launch, fail, launch, fail, launch, fail. He gets to the fourth launch. He has no more money. If this doesn't work, he's going to, you know, fail. And then also within that process comes up with this reusable rocket idea, right? Well, why would you just shoot it up in space and just leave it there floating around in space? You know, now I have to come up with all that money again. Maybe there's a efficient way for me to save money and just bring that back instead of buying a whole. So even if it's costing me $8 million to build these rockets and then shoot them into space, and it costs me another $4 million to get the rocket back so I can reuse it, then it makes sense. I saved $4 million. You know, if I can do it, if I can figure out the science. And so he did, you know, but nobody else was thinking that way. And he was thinking that way, and he wasn't even really deeply ingrained and entrenched in the dogma of that particular field. And so that, again, is part of this discussion where scientists think that I'm a scientist in this field, so nobody else can be right if they don't, you know, if they don't have access to the knowledge that I have based on the training and the research that I've done. But a lot of this is experiential.
Yeah.
And there's a component to this that has shown up over and over again where people who don't have backgrounds in things have these moments of inspiration, follow through with those moments of inspiration, and literally changes the dynamic and the way we think about things in whatever field it is.
Right.
And so studying Tesla himself, from what I understand, reading the one book I was reading, he came up with the idea of AC current after he decided, I'm done with college. It sucks. They don't have enough. It's not interesting. He goes home. He's staying with his mom. According to the story, he's walking in a field looking at the sun, and basically that eureka moment, you know, boom, AC current appears in his mind. He writes it down. Also, what appears in his mind is the understanding of how to make it work. And he does it.
Yeah.
It changes the world, you know?
And we know people who have had those sorts of, call it a download, eureka moment, who are currently working to change the world based on their inspirational moments.
Yeah. And people say that it can't be done and so on and so forth. And I don't know where the PsiGames is going to go, but that's how it appeared to me.
Okay.
It came to me in a very similar way.
Nice segue. I was going to come here next.
Yeah. And it's just like, you know, and I had magically the connections to make this thing work and to do this. And that's where I'm at, you know, and I've had people say that this can't happen and we're scared because of this and you shouldn't do this because of that. And we did this first one in 2025 and we saw just the opposite. We saw just pure magic.
Yeah, you're just daggers, man. You're just daggers right now. I see.
Well, I am a PSYOP guy.
I know. I want to talk a little bit about how that engages with, I mean, we had a lot of the conversation so far around the linguistic importance, the cultural backing on these things. And also, I think some of that PSYOP background helps you understand, and you can correct me here, not just the psychological risks, but the psychological opportunities in helping to bring some of these largely considered subjective experiences into some part of the discourse where we can talk about these things. And part of, we chatted a little bit last night about this, part of what I found to be so important and impactful was bringing people together in a place where they can have the conversation and say, it's not just me. Because a lot of folks with experiences cannot have these discussions with anyone around them, and it isolates them. To one of the points you were making. Do you, maybe this is a yes/no question and I'm killing it, but do you see some of your PSYOP experience helping to direct where you're going with the way you've structured this?
Yeah. So one of the things that PSYOP helped me do, I was always from what I understand, talking to people. So I removed my own self out of the equation. But from talking to people, I was also always a very deep thinker. And I have a good knack of seeing how patterns play out.
Right on.
And that naturally drew me towards something like PSYOP and becoming PSYOP. And so then when I went into PSYOP, I just learned a methodology and a protocol for how to actually piece these things together and how to look at this deeply based on human nature,
Right.
and these elements. Oddly enough, that also is the main tenet of ninjutsu, is that the ninja weren't, a lot of people think of the ninja as like these pure fighters. They were not pure fighters.
Right.
They were farmers and survival people, and they were just living out in the wilderness. And they were also spiritualists. They were also about like becoming one with nature and understanding their deeper essence. And that had to turn into like this combative method because of the turmoil at the time and how they were being treated and persecuted for being who they were.
Right.
And so that was an afterthought. The original was like, how do we relate to each other? How do we relate to people? Who am I truly? What's the essence of who I am? How do I relate to nature? Where's the nature inside of me? All that stuff was important. And then they became these psychological warfare specialists because they had to fight back, and they didn't have the numbers to like physically fight back.
Right.
So they had to come up with a different way. And they realized that, hey, we know a lot about human behavior and how people work. And if we can just use that, we can, dominate or survive.
Correct.
And so that was what I was training in when I met my friend, who actually, when I was going in, I was originally coming in as special forces. And a friend of mine I met at a bodyguard seminar, who was a ninjutsu practitioner, who's also in the Army at the time, was like, hey, you instead of SF, instead of special forces, you might want to go in this thing called PSYOP, which is basically a branch of special operations forces. So you'll be right there doing most of the training as the special forces guys. They just have, at a certain point, they have a different track, and then you focus on, they're focusing more on like creating force multipliers and working with people in the village to teach them how to become, self-sustaining and fighting for themselves, and then creating this opportunity for American to have allies in these different countries who are really strong. And then US PSYOP kind of move on to this kind of overarching understanding of the strategic, this operational aspect of like how people operate and how they think about the US and how they think about their allies and stuff like that. And then how you can fit in and work that to benefit the United States. And so that was a very deep lesson for me, because they have a whole series of trainings and things you have to go through to understand the mind and how the mind works. So then now that I'm at this point, what it allows me to do is it allows me to be very humbled and very open and understand that people are very simple, but also very complicated. We're very simple, and we're also very complicated at the same time.
Yeah.
So we're just like kind of like this balance of this stuff, this yin and the yang. Right?
Yep.
And then to see how we could best work together. And that's another thing the Army teaches you, is you could be on a team with somebody who grew up in, let's say, me as an African American. Let's say this person grew up hating African Americans for whatever reason. He just grew up that way. But we're on a team.
Yeah.
The Army doesn't care.
No.
The Army's like, you guys got to work together.
You're going to make it work.
And you're going to go fight together. And if you guys can't get along, both of you are going to die, because that's just the nature of combat. And so then we learn, okay, we don't have to agree 100%, but we have to find some common ground so that we can solve these problems and so that we can move forward. That was a very valuable lesson, because most people in American society can have the luxury to say, I don't like you. I'm going to find an organization and a group that has nothing to do with people who think like you, and then just be in that and now you have this echo chamber of how you think and what you think.
Yeah.
I don't like this job because these people think this way, and I'm going to quit and I'm going to find something else that allows me to do that. And some of that is really amazing that we have that opportunity, but also it can be a detriment to our overall growth because now we're in these echo chambers where we're not able to see any other perspective. And so PSYOP really allowed me to do that. And then when I had this download, and I think that's why the download chose me, was to help bring this together in this way. Because what we saw at the PsiGames was people, again, who had very lofty ideas about what Psi was. I met people who didn't even know what Psi was.
Yeah. How cool was that, by the way?
That was amazing.
Yeah.
And then I had people who had very scientific rooted ideas of what Psi was, but we were all in the same space enjoying it and learning from one another. And that's where I think the true essence of the PsiGames is, but also where this PSYOP understanding really shines from me, and that was one of the things that I thought would hinder me. And so, like I told you last night, I've been working on this book since 2017, and I had not wanted to put it out because I was like, then people were going to think that, and we deal with that stigma in PSYOP every time we come into a room. While I was in the Army,
if they know who you are,
they're like, oh, you're the PSYOP guy. Okay, you're the guy that messes with people's minds, and they run
now
off,
they're
and
on like the defensive. They're going to question everything you say. They're going to look for angles, and then they're not going to be solving the problem.
Exactly. As a matter of fact, the Army had changed the name to Military Information Operations Specialty or Specialty Operations, MISO, right?
So obfuscation at work.
Yeah, because they wanted to avoid that. But then what ended up happening, they just literally changed it back just recently because to PSYOP, because they just found like it was too confusing. People didn't even know.
They don't even know what your job is. Why is this miso guy in the room? Are we gonna have to soup?
Miso?
Like what is? Yeah,
exactly. It's like they were confused. So then it came back to where we are in this particular aspect. So where we have PSYOP, and so I think that's where it really helps me is that my friend actually talked me into finishing the book because he said, like, look, if your heart is pure, like like I know it is, and like you say it is. That you're trying to be. I don't want to say my heart is pure. I'm trying to be.
You're doing your best, man. Yeah.
He's like, then it'll shine through the book if you write it correctly, and that'll let people know that you're putting this book out there as a means to help people see deeper about all of the different negative things that might be going on, where negative actors are using PSYOP to kind of manipulate people and create division. And then you put this book out, which will give people tools to help them not be divided, but be unified, to unify together. And that was the other thing that I would tell people as they wrote me about the PsiGames. Oh, you're trying to single us out so that, government shadowy agents can
I heard people say that. Yeah.
And I was like, look, the truth of the matter is you're the most vulnerable hanging out by yourself doing these things. Because now you are open to whatever forces that might be out there that want to see harm to you. And then there's nobody to help you. And that's a lonely place to be. And a matter of fact, if we were to just take it out of the Psi realm and put it into like the abuse realm, abusers want to isolate their victims from everyone else.
That's right.
I want to isolate you. I don't want you to be around your family. I don't want you to be around your friends, because as I do these things to you, you have no support structure. And the opposite is that we help instill and we help provide unity and support structure. So now, if we bring it back to the Psi abilities, if you start having these experiences, one, you have people you can talk to who can share, oh, that happened to me. So now you don't feel like, you're this one-off isolated, person. And then two, you have a community of friends that you can build with. And if something does happen to you, there's people looking for you.
Yeah.
And I always joke and I say, what better place to have a group of people looking for you than a bunch of psychics, right? So
they're gonna find you real quick.
Yeah, exactly.
If they're motivated. Yeah.
But people still are operating from this place of fear for good reason. There have been things that have been done, and there's stuff coming out about like things like gate program and
I keep
stuff
hearing
like
about that.
Yeah. And so there are some spooky things.
Former
that
gate kid.
that happen.
Yeah.
So now how do we kind of get past that and provide ourselves with a place of, of security and unity? Now, I also don't have any illusions that there are going to be bad actors out there showing up to these events. But again, through unified cohesiveness, we identify who those people are and let everybody else know, right?
Yeah.
So the minute we see that this person is a bad actor, we don't keep it to ourselves. We say, hey, everyone, this is what's going on. This is what I was approached with. And now we're able to, as a community, single out those people and say, hey, we don't want you involved in what we're doing.
Right.
And so I have a whole ethical framework that I've been working on around the PsiGames.
Cool.
And it's coming out in the PsiGames book.
Good.
It's called Phoenix of the Heart. And everyone who is, I think it's gold and platinum tickets get one for free.
Oh, sweet.
So that this way it's a very understanding or a very deep book about the understanding of why we created PsiGames, what it stands for, what the ethics are. And so it makes it a lot harder for people to hijack what the download was that came to me.
Yep.
Here's the download. You might feel other things outside of this, but it's important that there's something here that says this is what the download was for me.
Mm-hmm.
And as it evolves, that's beautiful. But what we don't want people to do is change the dynamic of what the download was just because they want to change it.
Right.
And then there's nothing to really balance that out. Not everybody's going to get to talk to me and ask me personally, what was the download? Right. But now it's written in this book, and that's out there for the world to get a hold of and read at their leisure and say, oh, this is why. And this is what the ethics that were originally. Now, as we grow, I can say, yeah, we've grown beyond that, or we've grown with that to a new level, but at least you know where the foundation was.
And I really love the idea that there's this, and I haven't decided how to say it, either an intentional ethicality or an ethical intentionality,
Mm-hmm.
I think is probably the better way to say it,
Mm-hmm.
that you're starting to inculcate through the PsiGames.
Mm-hmm.
Because I had only surface level considered it as a community.
Mm-hmm.
But the way you're describing it is also helping people to draw folks into the community, almost like a sheepdog sheep mindset,
Mm-hmm.
being, not to get grandiose, but a little bit of shepherding to get the flock into a safer position against the wolves. There's that whole framework that I've heard in the past.
Yeah.
You might be familiar with it.
Yep.
So that's really interesting, and I had not thought about that. But not to like do a call to arms on this, but if you do see people that are in this space or any space that you're in who are finding themselves othered or made outside, it seems like this is a really important thing to do just to help protect each other. Not even in the Psi space. Like, let's take it outside of that.
Yeah. I think that's very important, out inside or outside that space. I find a really interesting story about this Richard Doty guy. Have you ever heard of him?
I've heard the name, but I'm not familiar.
He's like an Air Force intel guy or something like that, and he inserted himself in these UFO groups and started intentionally. His goal, his job was intentionally like to put false information out there. And now people know about him, and they're still interviewing him, and he's supposedly changed over, and and I find that very interesting that that he was identified as this person who was spreading false information.
And he's still getting access.
Yeah, he's still getting access, and now he's looked at as this person who's giving true information. Like he had a change of
God,
heart.
he flipped the script.
Yeah.
Oh, boy.
So now he was found out, and now he's like, oh, I had a change of heart, but now I'm going to tell you the truth,
Yeah. All that was BS before, but you can trust me today. Let this wolf back in.
Yeah, exactly. It's very interesting to see that. Now, again, I don't know the dude. I'm just using that as an example. He may truly have changed over or something, but I think that's the downside to some of this stuff is that it's hard to know if that's true or not. And so we have to identify those things. We have to as a group unify and say, hey, this is suspicious, and let's look at this and go from there. So that's where we are.
Yeah, and I think this is a better situation than, say, the UAP disclosure movement folks, where it is almost impossible, in my opinion, to know who is a controlled asset, who is actually genuinely doing things. And a lot of times I suspect the folks that seem the craziest are the ones that are probably the most genuine.
Yeah.
I'm sure maybe you know the Y Files. And who HHN, of course he did.
Yeah.
Yeah, he made some really interesting points around the disclosure hearings, how almost every single person that was up there was either still employed by the government and thus subject to their PR requirements, or there were, let's say, some interesting circumstances around them, which makes the whole thing look like a giant PSYOP. And it's I think that it's unfortunate that we have PSYOP and we have Psy, making it tough.
Well, that's why the Psy came about with PSI versus PSY, was because JB Ryan recognized that if he started writing papers as a psychologist professor at Duke University, he couldn't use PSY because then people would think psychology
or psychological.
So he started looking at, well, what do we have, and then found the Greek letter for Psi, which also stood for, by the Greeks, for psychic ability. And then he was like, oh, this is perfect, and he started using PSI.
Oh, that's way too powerful.
And that kind of introduced it to us here in the West as a term, or as a word that we would use to denote psychic ability.
Yeah. So where do you see the PsiGames going? I know you've got some pretty cool big plans.
Yeah. So I see the PsiGames being, as PsiGames International, as a predictor of where we want to go. And we want to be international, and we want to be like the Psychic Olympics for the world, where we have people from all over the world get together and benchmark where we are in these different psi abilities. So I'm just the other aspect of, let's say, the UAP disclosure conversation. There is an academic, scientific aspect where people say, I want to get the government or some entity, or find out for sure that these entities and these beings and these UAPs exist, right? And that's one side of the battle. I think that's important. It's great. It gives people something to really strive for, freedom of information and so on and so forth. The other aspect is that I say to myself, well, what are we doing as a species to really up our game?
Yeah.
Right? So that's cool. It's like the kumite.
Yeah. I'm literally thinking down this line as you're saying this. Yeah.
It's like, oh, there's a place where people are doing martial arts and they're the best of the best. And I heard it's a myth that they exist, but I'm going to get to the bottom. And then it's like, okay, now you found the kumite.
Right.
Who are you in relation to that? Who are you in relation to this big secret? Are you someone who is just a spectator on the sideline who could have had potential to be an actual participant in that conversation, but now you're off on the sideline because you didn't actually do any work?
Right.
Or are you going to be a person who has the potential to actually to be a participant in the conversation because you're at a level in which allows you to be in that? And that would be in any circumstance. I want to be a part of, this big CEO or this group, then I have to develop my skills to be able to be in that room.
Right.
And so my portion of this with the PsiGames is that we have these abilities. We have technology that's starting to progress faster than what we can do. A lot of people are afraid that technology is going to be able to overcome human beings. But then we have all of the science saying that we haven't really tapped into our own full capabilities.
Right.
And then on top of that, if you're afraid of a machine outdoing you, well, we also have potential to influence machines.
Exactly.
Right? And the Pear Labs found that out in their research, the Princeton Engineering Anomalous Research Labs. That's what Pear stands for. And they found out that was influencing random number generators.
Right, those black box
you know,
experiments.
Yeah. And so there's all these experiments that show that we can do that, but now we haven't been really working towards it or training towards it.
We haven't had a reason so far, but now we're starting to. And I kind of want to go back to the Kumite blood sport analogy here, because I really do think there's something to that. So taking this internationally, you're going to start seeing people adopting best practices. You look back
We've already seen it.
Oh, it's out there. We
Your
can all
friend
see.
is a perfect example, right?
Dude, Anna's killing it.
Yeah.
By taking ideas and experimenting.
Well, our friend. She's my friend.
Our friend, right. Sorry. Yeah. I'm not claiming. And there's an aspect of play. And each individual gets to explore the space in their own way, but they can cherry pick some of these best ideas. Sort of a callback to, I don't know if you're a UFC MMA fan.
Oh yeah, of course.
Yeah, you remember UFC 1? When Gracie showed up nobody knew what to do with this. I'm going to pretend he's only 80 pounds, but he looked at it like that changed the game. And nobody would have thought that this little Brazilian guy was going to show up and actually dismantle everybody with techniques that nobody had seen, at least in the West. And I think we're going to start seeing this competitive growth mechanism coming into play. And to your point, we are seeing it already. And as this expands, more and more people are going to come in with new technology, let's call it, around the way they're applying or discovering. And every once in a while, let's make this like a different framework. The meta is going to be thrown in terms of how we prepare or how we engage in this, because it is a competition, the way you're framing it. And I think most of the greatest advancements that we see as a species, at least, comes through competition.
Yeah.
Because we have this motivation and this drive to just excel, or a lot of people do.
Yeah.
And I kind of love that, because we're going to see so much growth in this space that was previously inhibited. And we talked a little bit about this because of societal norms or pressures of control. It doesn't necessarily behoove people to let those quote unquote beneath them develop in these ways. And so I kind of want to thank the internet existing for a lot of this, because we are, while constantly at risk for the aforementioned echo chambers, we're also in this co-discovery space. And I keep seeing it as you're talking, as an ebb and a flow, as we start to explore and then contract upon what we decide is the agreed upon norm. And then someone comes in and breaks that, and we go back to an exploratory space. And we're going to see an ebb and flow, I think, in all of this. And we're in a very cool flow. Yeah.
I agree with that. I do want to make sure that because this is public, and you and I are both martial artists, and I brought up blood sport, but ultimately we're not talking about like fighting.
No. This is just a useful metaphor, analogy.
And but the idea of being able to push yourself, if we just look at like the Olympics, the things that the people can do in the Olympics or sports in general. If you look at 1970s basketball players and you look at 2023 basketball players,
not even the same game.
It's totally different. The way they dribble, how fast they are, how high they can jump, where, the movements they can do and from where. And there's whole like schools of exercise science based around these people, and, and like research and development, and it's a totally different thing. But that started with the game.
And there are specializations. I'm going to keep this going on this. You don't even have to have a specific body type, although there are advantages for being tall. You can focus your game on other elements based on technical expertise that are going to, again, let's call it a meta. It's going to totally turn the game on its head. And without those sports, whether it be long distance running or any of this stuff, a lot of the improvements in human performance and understanding of nutrition and diet, exercise, all that stuff came out of that, which really is helping to change the world, make us be better individuals. And so, but that, if we had no competitions and any of this stuff, chances are we would not advance in a lot of the things that we've advanced in, whether it be full-on technology around the human body and the human condition,
whether it be psychological. I mean, a lot of psychology studies, about our psychology were done. Our physiology was done. All of that stuff started happening because of these different arenas where people were, pushing themselves to the limits. And so that is one aspect of it. But then also, how do we do that in a friendly way is one of the things that we're doing with PsiGames.
Yeah.
And, so, because
so far that seems to be the case.
Yeah.
Like, there's little rumblings, but yeah.
Yes, exactly. And that there are people out there that undoubtedly are going to have either a negative opinion of the PsiGames or things like it, or also who will be doing their own versions of things in a negative way to develop negatively.
Yeah.
Now, I've heard this like kind of insidious, or not insidious, but this rampant like kind of idea that you can't be in a negative space and do these things. But you and I both know as martial artists and knowing the stories of martial artists who've used energy and things of that nature, there are bad people all the time and engaged in these.
Yeah.
And I like to think of it as like Star Wars with the Sith and the Jedi. Like, of course there are people who can be broken and have issues and challenges and still be able to do these things.
Right.
A matter of fact, what some of the research suggests is that many people who have really strong psychic abilities have had trauma in their life, and they've learned how to disassociate, and that disassociation is a gateway for being able to do some of this stuff. So, and not all those people were picked up, not all those people got counseling and got friends and became really great people. Some of those people are still living some really hard and dangerous lives, but yet their psi is showing up. It's just maybe nobody has shown them how to like channel that to the point where they can do really damage. But it's a big world. It could be somebody out there using these things. And in my practice of yoga, there's a lot of stories about yogis who have gone off the rails.
We can all find them very quickly.
Yeah,
there have been some big pieces put out about them.
Yeah, they have these different aspects of their chakra that is opened, and they have these abilities, these siddhis, and then they start using them for these very negative things. And the book Autobiography of the Yogi, there were yogic masters that were using it to like sway people and do all this stuff. And that's not what you're supposed to do. But again, that's human nature. You have these negative elements and these positive elements, and some people can really lean into the positive, and some people really lean into the negative for whatever reason. And they exist. And so I think it might be a little difficult to say that these things can't really flourish to their greater degree without it. I mean, we have a series of emotions, and fear and anger are super powerful emotions. And when not checked, can become very dangerous things. Where I can have fear and anger and go out and literally murder thousands, hundreds of people for whatever reason.
And justify it to yourself.
And justify it, To
yourself at least.
And then I could also have love and compassion and go out and help thousands of people. And so they're very strong in both ways. And to think that one doesn't exist, I think sets us up for a place where we create an illusion that's very dangerous for ourselves. Because again, those who know...
I have to acknowledge that, by the way, because I do tend to disbelieve in certain aspects, and I need to check that.
Well, I was about to say, those who know are the most vulnerable. Right? So instead, I think the true thing is to acknowledge those things within ourselves. Acknowledge those things within our communities and say, hey, there's these things that exist. I personally don't want to go down that path, so I'm always constantly checking myself, asking people to help me check myself as well. And then also I say to myself that there are people going down these paths that may not want to be checked, that really enjoy being down these paths for whatever reason. And so not people I want to be around, but also I would love to be able to help them. And if not help them, if they try to take advantage of someone else, I would love to be able to help that person. And so that means that I have to be the best that I could be in what I'm learning and what I'm doing as far as love and compassion. And, that's where I really love and identify with the idea of the Jedi.
Yeah, I keep coming back to that. Yeah.
Yeah, they didn't want to fight. They didn't want to be violent, but they did know that there might be a time that they had to step up and do something in order to protect others.
Yeah.
And so that's where I fall on the spectrum. There's also, there's also the people out there like the renunciates who will not be violent at all, regardless of what the situation is. And I can honestly say that I haven't reached that level yet.
Mm-hmm.
And
that's okay.
Of the monk that's so pure that they're like, man,
Right.
I don't care if you shoot me in the face.
Right.
I'm still not going to raise a hand.
This is just my shell.
Yeah,
it
this
means
is my
nothing,
shell.
and it is better not to
Exactly.
develop this karmic bond or whatever.
Exactly. Right. And I would love to know those people, and I'm happy to say that, or not happy, but I'm growing, but at this point in my life, I'd be a person who would want to protect that person.
Yeah.
From harm. And so,
well, look at your path, of course. Like this tracks.
Yeah.
And probably wouldn't have developed the PsiGames had you not had these experiences and this mindset.
Yeah.
Because again, that push to have that community, I think, is fundamental to exactly what you're describing. Because when we are in these community spaces, we have the capacity to help each other and to be helped in turn. Boy, a lot of layers on this, but the risk of mastery is the suspicion or suggestion to oneself that you don't need that help. And I mean, you mentioned PTSD. That's how we got to that point. Once it's shown, it's hard not to see. And once you see it in yourself, you start to recognize the importance of that outreach. In my opinion, let's call it my opinion, Hakim.
That we're still growing. Yeah, opinions are.
God, we're all still growing, and there's an ethical question here. Boy, it's touchy, but acknowledging and allowing for those negative explorations. And I mean, we saw this post World War II with Paperclip and some other aspects bringing some of the scientists over that had moved things forward in extremely low ethical frameworks. How do we approach that? Like, is it worth the knowledge? I mean, this goes back to Genesis, right? Is it worth the knowledge to have that experience in play? And I don't know how far we want to go into that.
Well, people did. I mean, we had
100%.
We as the U.S. actually did that. And,
that's exactly.
What is it? Von Braun.
Yeah. We have rockets.
Yeah, exactly. We have rockets. And so.
And those guys were into some weird esoteric, not weird, but conceptually, they were into some interesting esoteric and occult level readings.
Yeah.
And some really potentially, as people describe it, holy scriptures from India. They all read the Bhagavad Gita.
Yeah. These flying machines. And again, all of these things, whether either they were true and then we are tapping into it, maybe they weren't true, and then they inspired us to look at what it could be. And again, that's the idea behind the PsiGames. You cannot believe in Psi, and it inspires you to start practicing but you see the PsiGames and it inspires you to start practicing on your own to see if it is real, or you can believe in it and it motivates you to continue your path, right? And so, that those things are what's really important, and that'll help us advance, I think,
I think I agree.
But we're trying to do it by getting with people, but nobody's perfect. So I'm sure there are people at the PsiGames who have, tainted past and things of that nature. I mean, even I myself as a young man had, a lot of like really hairy, crazy moments, and so, but, I grew out of that and I made a choice of where I wanted to be. I had 3 people tell me on my path, 3 different readers or seers, I would say, that I met in my path at 3 different times. One was a Muslim guy that I met in Qatar who did a reading for me and told me that I had this potential for great good or great evil, right? Yeah. Then I met a gypsy woman in the mountains of West Virginia who did a reading on me and who said literally the same exact words. And then I had a friend who was a card reader who read my cards and said, oh, I had the people who have my same cards are Hitler and Martin Luther King.
I had a similar experience.
So
Yeah.
so it's like these things are huge, and so at some point it was really nerve-wracking for me because I was like, well,
What am
where
I
am I
doing?
going?
Right,
Hey,
right.
what
How
am
much
I
of this
doing?
is in my control now? We go into free will determinism here, and you're
Exactly.
reading cards that are theoretically a
Exactly.
representation of reality and the vibration at the moment.
Exactly.
What are we doing?
Exactly.
Hakim, where are you going with the
Yep.
site?
Yep.
Sorry, kidding.
So yeah, I had to in those years really sit down and look at who I was and look at where I was going, and then strive to be the best version of me that I can, and then keep people around me that can help me reflect and look at myself and say, hey, this is who you say you are, and you did this thing that doesn't kind of match that, and then I have to really reflect on that. And so I remember telling a friend this story 5 years ago, and I was like, yeah, it's always this fear in the back that maybe I'm doing the thing that's going to take me off on this other way.
Yes.
And she looked at me and she said, you haven't figured out that you're on the good path yet. She was like, look at your last 10 to 15 years. What have you been working on in your life? How have you been helping humanity and growing? And tell me where in there have you done the evil that, this great evil? And I was like, actually, I haven't. Yeah. And she was like, yeah, so stop worrying about it. Just keep doing what you're doing.
I would argue differently. I might argue differently. I think part of an important aspect of what was being described there is the capacity for self-reflection. Right. And I think without that, you can fall right off the edge and think you're, another curse of mastery, maybe. You think you're heading in the right direction to the exclusion of consideration that maybe something has shifted.
Yeah. But I also feel like you could, in following that with balance, that you could also be so afraid of it that you pull it to you, that you bring it out of yourself.
Gross. Okay. Yeah. No, I can see that.
So you're so fearful of something and you're thinking about it all the time that you actually manifest it in your own reality. And so,
God, isn't existence fascinating?
Yeah. So there's a constant balance there. There's a constant self-reflection. There's not only self-reflection, but there's surrounding yourself with people who can see from the outside in, and then having to really reflect on what they say.
Yeah.
Because there are people who will see you wrong all the time because of the things that are going on in their life.
Their perspective is going to cast their view of you.
Yeah. I just had this, Dave Ramsey, this financial guru, always says, you wouldn't go to an out of shape person to ask them how to be in shape. However, so that's one aspect of it, right?
Yeah.
So there's this out of shape person who's looking at you as they're eating donuts or whatever, and they're saying like, you just gotta, go out and run 12 miles every day and do all of this stuff, and not knowing every day that's probably gonna, especially at the beginning, gonna blow my shins out and put 100%. Me on a bed. So maybe you don't know what you're talking about, right? However, could that guy also be a person who used to be an Olympian?
I was just thinking that.
Who just now is just like let go.
They're in a hard spot.
Yeah,
Depression sucks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so now they have the knowledge.
Right.
So they're able to tell you what really needs to be done. They don't present it right at that particular time in their life. And you see that with coaches all the time. There's some really great coaches out there that used to be good, like let's say martial artists, fighters, or runners or whatever. But when you look at them today, you're like, what happened,
Yeah.
And so maybe they're just at a different point in their life, but doesn't mean that they can't give you good quality. So you have to also, so my point there is you have to be careful of when you're getting advice or when you're getting guidance from somebody, where are they at in their life, and what is a projection of who you are that's not true, and what is a projection or what is an actual truth that they're telling you about who you are. And so that within itself is its own science. So you have to do that for yourself.
Yeah.
Look in the mirror. Who am I? What am I? Okay, now let me cross-check this with other people. Who am I? What am I? And then let me cross-check that with the person I'm asking.
Yeah.
To make sure that they're not seeing me incorrectly.
Right.
Or they're not telling me something that they really don't have a good grasp of. But they're in that place where they believe they do.
Right.
And then even in that, the illusion of the influencer, right?
Yeah.
So regardless of following either one of those people, there is this illusion that people are setting up where they look like they're doing the thing, but then they're not really doing the thing. They just did it for that post. And so that goes into, where is that person in their illusion? So is their illusion turning into a projection on my reality? And so I have to be careful with that. So in getting this information, whether it be for myself, whether it be from nature, whether it be from another human being, there's always an opportunity where I have to really deeply dive into where that is. I remember I had this conversation with a friend, and I'm willing to put myself out there in this way, where the friend was like, I figured from you just always need to be right. And that really bothered me. So I remember I walked away and I was like, really? I was like, because I literally have asked this particular friend, I've called this friend up on like 100 times and said, hey, can you give me advice about this? Because I'm not sure where I stand on it.
Yeah.
And then they gave me their advice. And I also tell my friends that just because you give me advice doesn't mean I'm always going to follow it.
Yeah.
But I just want to check.
There's a level of discernment there.
Yeah, I want to move it outside of myself for a second and then just get some reflection and get some back and forth, maybe some different perspective. And then I still might come up with the same conclusion, or I might change. And so I've asked this person several things. They gave me some things that I've changed. They gave me some things that I didn't. But then now we're at this moment where all of a sudden they're saying, you always have to be right.
Yeah.
And
that doesn't feel good.
And I was like, that's really interesting. So then I went and I thought about it. I actually meditated on it for about 3 hours, like a full-on meditation.
Right on.
Really reflecting on it, wrote some stuff down. And I came back, I said, hey, you said that I always need to be right. I was like, can you give me some examples?
Ooh, brutal.
They were like, it was like looking at a ghost.
Yeah.
Well, I just know that there was a time.
It's just a vibe.
Yeah. And I was like, oh, okay. So this is not.
Yeah.
This is not. I don't think this is actually a true assessment. I think this person might be dealing with something, and then they projected it on me.
And also, it hit you in a certain way that you had to do a 3-hour meditation contemplation.
Yeah, because I wanted to make sure. For me, it's very important, especially with the energetic, it seems like power that I willed, that I'm always reflective of that. And that I say that to myself, like, hey, this is where, oh man, maybe I need to stop and pause because I'm going down this other path, and then stop and reflect. And because I have that strong energy, like these people have been telling me, I'm always willing to want to really spend some time checking that energy. And so when this person said that, I wanted to stop and check it. Oh, wait a minute. But what I do is I've gotten enough evidence that my instincts work really well.
Yeah.
So when I have a specific instinct about something, I do follow it quite often. And somebody else might try to say, okay, you should do it this way. And then I'm like, yeah, but my instinct, I think, is really good on this. Now if that happens 5 times in a row, that can make you feel like
a little hubris might show up.
Yeah, it can make you feel like my friend, that I feel like I'm always right.
Right.
Because I'm not following your advice. So then, but that's not how I'm taking it. I'm just really feeling in my energy that this is the proper way for me to move at this particular time.
Right.
Doesn't mean that I don't believe in your advice. It just means that there's something deeper in me that's telling me this is the path that I need to move.
Yeah.
But from your perspective, I'm not listening.
Yeah.
You know? And even if I say the words, which I do quite often, I hear you, I think it's a good idea, but I don't feel like it's where I need to be right now.
Yep.
If I do that 5 times in a row, now, if I do 1 time in a row, I'm like, oh crap, you know what?
Yeah.
You're right.
Yeah.
Because of the nature of how humans kind of operate, we see the negative more than we see the positive.
Oh, we
so even if I took your advice
That's a survival mechanic.
Even if I took your advice on 2 things, if I said no to 5 things, you're still holding on to the 5.
Yep.
So for you, in this kind of illusion, you feel like, I always think I'm right, even though I've taken 2 of your advices and implemented them because they were very important to me. But the other 5, I was like, I feel this other way. It's not about I don't believe in you. It's just that now that I've heard a different perspective, my energy is still leaning in this other direction.
And let's also note that you continue to go to this friend for advice.
Yeah.
Which should highlight, well, I can see why they, not to take it down this path, gang, but I can also see why they might take it personally, that maybe they feel that they're a punching bag in this regard.
Yeah.
And also, what a gift that they gave you 3 hours of contemplation on.
Yeah.
Like, there's some gratitude there.
Yeah. It's and mind you, to the audience, 3 hours might sound like a lot of time, but if you really spend a lot of time in meditation, that can go by in a snap.
Yeah.
And so, you know, it's relative, you know. I've done some meditations. I've thought I was only in it for 5 minutes, and it was a couple hours. And I'm sure there are other people out there who've had those experiences.
I just did one last Sunday with a group, and it was only a 30-minute meditation. I swore I was in there for 2 or 3 hours. And it wasn't because I was bored. It was fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like dozing off, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes you can doze off and you're like, man, that was a little power nap. And it turned out it was like 4 hours.
Yeah, whoops.
And you're like, wait a minute. Whoa, I've been sleeping for half the day.
Oh, my night is screwed.
Yeah, I thought I was just laying down for a quick power 20-minute, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
And now here you are hours later. Or even when you stop that alarm in the morning, you know, you get the alarm goes off at 7:30. You're like, oh, man, let me just lay here for a few more minutes. And then you open your eyes, and now it's 9:30, and you're like,
whoops.
Oh, wait a minute.
I needed that time. That's my bad.
So I just wanted to put in perspective that, you know, I said 3-hour meditation. For people watching, they might be like, oh, that's a lot of time. But
who
really,
has that kind of time?
Yeah, really for me, I didn't think about it. I just went in, and then when I came out, that just happened to be the time that passed. So,
Yeah. Well, and speaking of time that's passed, Hakim, this has been amazing.
Oh, yeah, thank you.
I want to go deep on about 12 of the things we talked about, so I'll be calling you later.
Yes.
Everybody, thank you so much. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Hakim Isler, man.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Gang, have a great day.
Yeah.
All right, gang, that's it for today's episode. A huge thank you to Hakim Isler for taking time to sit down with me. He was incredibly generous to invite me into his dojo and his home over the holiday weekend. Hakim and I have been having a variation on this discussion for months now, and I feel so grateful and fortunate to have been able to make this episode happen. Also, a quick shout out to 2 gentlemen that I met in my recent travels, Ben and Don. Thank you for the gift of conversation in the air, and I look forward to getting to meet up when we're all back in the same place again. And of course, thanks to Team NMS, Anna the Wild Orazan and Emily Rivers. The show wouldn't exist the way that it does without the 2 of you. If you enjoyed today's conversation, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and comment on the show wherever you are, and please share us with a friend. It really helps us grow and bring on even more incredible guests like Hakim Isler. You can also follow along on Instagram at No More Strangers Podcast to keep the conversation going. Lastly, thank you again for tuning in. And until next time, take care, keep exploring, and as always, I hope that you now have one less stranger in your life.